Hey guys, today we're going to interview Matt Molloy, who just opened the Dorchester Brewing Company. Well, Matt is an entrepreneur and he's a very interesting example of someone who's been an executive at startups, at Zipcar, at Dex, and now he is leading charge with his own startup where he's co-founder and CEO. And so here today we're going to learn about the beer industry. It's an industry that we can look into, be curious about, and extract lessons from it. And then talk about Matt's transition from being a startup executive to being a startup entrepreneur. And what you'll find interesting about Matt is that Matt's been a marketing executive, so he understands concepts such as target customer and persona really, really well. And you'll hear from him about the importance, as we often stress in the course, of building your business from the customer back. And when in the journey you know that you're actually doing that. So let's welcome Matt.
This is Matt.
Hey Matt, how are you? Congrats on the grand opening.
Oh, thanks a lot. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had hundreds and hundreds of people pour through. It was a really exciting time.
You are the founder of Dorchester Brewing Company. Tell us about it.
Sure. Well, I'm actually a co-founder, so I'm doing this with a couple other people, very successful business people. But yeah, I'm a CEO. And Dorchester Brewing Company is, we'll call it a two-sided business. We're a contract brewing facility, so we make beer for other brewers. So think of that as collaborative consumption for beer. And then, of course, we have a tasting room, which serves beer, and you can taste it or pour it in pints. And you can come in off the street and taste the beer that we make, but more importantly, the beer that we're actually making for the other brewers. So we're providing this really cool ecosystem for brewers to actually get the word out about their beer in a very frictionless environment.
So you guys make beer and you help others make their own beer as well.
Yeah, so our primary business, one side of the market is we make beer for other brewers that are going through this rapid growth cycle. And on the other side, we pour that beer and we pour our own. The reason why you would want that is, we have a 20-line tap system in the front, and if we're making IPAs for everybody in the back of the brewery, the market wants something more than an IPA, so we have to fill up the tap lines with other really cool styles of beer.
That's awesome. Our students are very curious. I would love to learn about the beer industry. So let me ask just a couple of questions that may seem kind of obvious, but, maybe a good discussion starts there. Anyway, what is beer?
Beer has been around for many, many, many centuries. It is, it's the equivalent of liquid bread, right? It is a series of very basic ingredients that, when put together, make something pretty wonderful. It originated as a necessity. The water quality was so bad hundreds of years ago, they had to figure out a way of actually purifying it. So instead of purifying it, they actually turned it into alcohol so they could drink it. And that's kind of like we'll call that the basic origin of beer. And then it turned into something that was so wonderful because it makes you happy when you drink it.
Yes,
which of course, who doesn't love beer, right? And so it has been one of these things that has, over the centuries and decades, has transformed into something very different. It was a rapid growth market in the turn of the century, and there were so many breweries all around Boston and Dorchester and Jamaica Plain. And then there was a series where there was a contraction of the market, and some of the bigger brands took over. There were laws that were changed around distribution. And it was really interesting that it really started to, a lot of these breweries were bought and or went out of business. But the market was there, and so all of a sudden the market was retrained in the 50s and 60s to really like something that was a highly optimized product, whether that be a Budweiser or some other, like a Schlitz. They were good beers, but they weren't craft beers. And over time, big business got involved, and they started to look at how do we optimize margin on the business. And the beer, it changed. Like the turn of the century beer is no longer. Now you actually have something that is larger brands with hundreds of millions of barrels of beer being distributed a year.
Yeah.
Through these very, very cool networks. But beer has changed dramatically. In fact, the craft market is, anyone could, just do some basic Googling, it literally started out at 5%, 10%, 20% of the market. And what's happening is the market demand for craft beer is outstripping supply.
What's the difference between a Budweiser and the beer that you make, which ostensibly is craft beer?
Sure. It really comes down to ingredients, and some would say batch size, right? When there's a market for Budweiser. People love Budweiser, and if you like Budweiser, that's awesome. All beer is good beer, right? But it's a very different ingredient list. You'll find brewers brewing in smaller batches. There's a lot more hop usage and specialty grain usage, and so there's a lot of experimentation in craft beer, and I think that's what the market is really liking a lot.
Well, you can go into a bar today and see literally hundreds of varieties of beer. And you're entering into this market at a time when there's so much proliferation. What else can anyone really, and not just you, add if you want to be a beer-preneur, so to speak? What can you do different?
Well, I mean, you could do two things. You could be a brewer that makes different beers, or you could actually be somebody that actually helps a brewer be successful, right? So we went down both paths, and I think that's important. I mean, I think there's always room for more beers. Yeah, there might be 100 beers, but there are hundreds of wines. And I think that's the one thing that everyone always says, wow, is the beer market, ripe for contraction? And we all laugh, or at least I laugh. I mean, if you just compare it to the wine market, there are hundreds of varieties of wine, and yet that market is still moving forward. So, I think the market is more breweries. We'll see 2-3x the amount of breweries in Massachusetts, and there will still be not enough supply because not only are the brewers brewing, but people are being trained to want and crave craft beer. So this whole market is changing around us, and that's one of the reasons why I got involved. I'm a collaborative consumption kind of like, I don't know, I just love finding new markets that are ripe for disruption. And you see this as this is a perfect time to come in and actually provide unique services and just a new offering to drive the market forward. And that's really critical.
Yeah. So, why do you think it's a perfect time? You speak with so much passion and you have some sense of belief. Tell us more about it. Give us insight into your thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think to know me is I'm a serial entrepreneur. I am very passionate about what I do. And if you don't have passion in it, don't do it. That's the way I look at it. I helped grow. I was at 8 years at Zipcar building a whole new thing called collaborative consumption, which led into things like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb. And he worked at edX, which was this awesome initiative with Harvard and MIT that allows people to rethink or get access to education that they would not normally have access to. So it's no surprise that I went into beer. And people laugh when I say that. And I was like, well, the reality is what we have produced here. We have transformed, we have turned what we call the contract brewing market, which is other people making beer for other brewers, on its end. We did the market research to know what the brewer really wanted, and it's really important that people understand that you cannot create need, you meet need. So we spent 6 to 8 months really talking with a lot of brewers.
That's amazing.
If we could build the most perfect way to actually get beer made, what would it be and why? And so classic market research, right? And, there are not a lot of people that have built global businesses before in this space. So when you ask these very obvious questions, you learn a lot about what in our case, our partner wants. And so it's no surprise we're already sold out in our phase 1 implementation, and we're not even open yet. Because every time I tour a brewer, I partner through this facility, they literally say, wow, of course you thought of that. Wow, of course you thought of that. And then, of course, it lands with a tour of our 4,000 square foot production cooling environment, which just does not exist in today's contract brewing environments. They want your beer out of there as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. And we're okay if you leave it in our cooler for 3 weeks. So, because of market research and because of our passion in this space, we've been able to provide something that just is not in the marketplace today. And the good news is the market typically rewards that. And so we have 7 to 10 awesome brewers that are going to be brewing with us starting in September.
Yeah, in all of our courses, we stress how important it is to build your business from the customer back. Tell us about your interviews of your potential customers. What questions did you ask, and what insights did you learn along the process that were new to you?
Yeah, of course. So obviously I have 3 other business partners here, and one of them is our head brewer. He is a really talented brewer. He was the head brewer at Harpoon for over 10 years. And one of the things, he would have been a customer if he wasn't a partner. And so just actually getting in and really talking with that brewer and, us having these multiple conversations, he did contract brewing 2 years prior to starting this. And he was a classic customer, and he said, here are the problems with contract brewing, and he just laid it out. And so then when you start to talk with brewers, you start to validate that through questioning or just hearing them talk, letting them talk about what their challenges are. So it's no surprise that our customers that we're going to be getting are most of them are existing contract brewing customers somewhere else or have done it in the past. So they understood the value of it. They just wanted a better experience. And so, but it's all, it can be basic. It doesn't have to be focus groups. It can just be thoughtful, well thought out questioning, and discussions with your partners. And that's basically what drove us to build the product set that we built.
Well, Matt, you were a marketing executive prior to Dorchester Brewing Company, so you understand the concept of customer persona.
Yep.
Describe the customer persona in your case and what problem that persona has and how exactly you solve that problem.
Sure. So there are a couple personas. We'll call it the early starter. And that's somebody who is, the young brewer, we'll call it. And that's someone who loves, super passionate about beer. And they might be brewing 2 to 3 barrels of beer, which is a small amount, and they want to go big or go home. And the reality is, our minimum barrelage is 60 barrels, which is not a lot for most brewers. But the early guy, we might be a little bit too big for them, but we keep the relationships, and we know someday we'll be brewing for some of these folks. Then there's this, we'll call it the beer astronaut, for lack of a better term, which is somebody who's on a rocket ship. And it's really fascinating because you see folks doing 5, 10, 15 barrels on making beer on a 5, 10, or 15 barrel system. But then they said, you know what, I want to go big. And they are going big. They hired a really great distributor, and the distributor says, my supply is outstripping your demand. You have to figure out how you get me more beer, or I am not going to continue to push your beer. And they can either make that $3 million in investment, $2 to $3 million in investment, or they can go somewhere else to get that beer made. Because the reality is, they might have 5 or 6 styles, but the distributor only wants 1 or 2 made at those volumes for now. So we'll call that the beer astronaut. And those are the two. Frankly, those are the 2 primary personas. There's another persona which is, I think I might be too big for you. And those people that have already gone through that growth curve that want 200, 300, 400 barrels of beer, which is a lot of beer for somebody like us, because we've geared our business model for someone who's doing, 60 to 240 to 300. I might be too big for you is we're going to be brewing for one of those folks, but we might have to, in a good way, let them go down the line because they've grown so much that they'll go on to a facility that services a larger brewer. So those are the main 3 primary personas, and we're focused in on right on the middle one, which is helping people go through that explosive growth curve and providing the inventory that they need, reassurance that they need, that they can grow with us, and we will grow with them. And I think that's the key thing here, right, is you look at, yes, I might have the inventory today, but will you have that for me in a year? And I think we've actually stopped sales right now because we want to make sure that we service the needs of our the new customers, the new partners, and we want to be able to grow with them. So if I actually have empty fermentation utilization for a while, I'm okay with that because I know that my business partners are going to grow into it, the brewing partners that we have. So it's about being a good partner, and I throw that word around not lightly because they're not customers, they're partners, and I think that's a very important thing with all of these personas. They want somebody that's going to be a partner of theirs that understands the business, understands their challenges, and will be there to support them and not try to screw them, frankly. And I know that's a little aggressive to say, but we went into this with a mission statement around supporting the small to medium-sized brewer, and all of us are aligned around that. And I think that's very important to have the right people in the organization that are aligned around the right mission. And I think we've all done that.
To make sure we understand you correct, your persona is the beer astronaut, someone who is going through explosive growth. And the problem for your persona is, hey, can I meet the exploding demand?
Yes. And
you help them solve that problem.
Absolutely. In an extremely frictionless way. Because that beer astronaut right now, if they were to have to do this now, they might be able to get the beer brewed somewhere else, but then they can't get it packaged there. So they actually then have to haul the beer somewhere else to get it packaged.
That's a pain.
Or they have to use these weird mobile canning solutions, which are great, but they're mobile. And so they just want to say, can I just get my beer made and packaged at one place? And that's what we built. So we built basically a brewery for beer astronauts. And when they come in here, they are like, wow, you have nailed it. And it's so funny, I knew we had nailed the product mix at Zipcar when I was on the street talking, and I sell right next to all the junior salespeople at junior marketers. It's very important to be on the street and listening to what the customer says. And we knew we hit the mark at Zipcar when people said, "This sounds too good to be true. What's the catch?" And when you hear those words come out of your partners or customers' mouth, you know you've nailed the mix and potentially have nailed the go-to-market strategy.
Hey, this is really really helpful because a lot of our students ask, they say, hey, well, you tell us that we need to interview our customers, and that's great. I'm happy to do that. But when do I know that I have something?
Yep. I always talk about this. When I talk about Zipcar, I talk about two things. One is called the aha moment, and the other is it's too good to be true. So every product has an aha moment. The aha moment is when you watch your customer go through the process, and all of a sudden they stop and their eyes light up, and they say, "I get it." And that's the aha moment. There's usually one or two triggers in a business that will actually elicit that response. At Zipcar, it turns out the aha moment was when you took the zip card for the first time and showed them putting it on the windshield of the car and watching the doors unlock. That was the aha moment. And they go, wow, this actually works. This is crazy. So they had bought into the whole process, the idea of the concept, but it wasn't until they actually physically saw it work, and then they started to connect it like, this is how I'm actually going to engage with the product. And that was the aha moment at Zipcar. So we tried to get people to that aha moment as fast as possible. And that's super important. It's really super important. And then, of course, that leads into they try it, they come out and say, after the aha moment, they come back to you and you're talking, you try to close them. They're like, hey, why wouldn't you use the service? And then they go, because the consumers every consumer is a skeptical consumer, and they should be, because there's so many marketing messages out there. Many are based in reality, some not. So then you hear hey, wait a second. Okay, before I sign up and plop down $75 on a Zipcar membership, this sounds too good to be true. What's the catch, right? And those two things, when you hear those, when you see the aha moment and you hear those words or something to that effect, you know that they're onto something. But you got to listen to your customer, because you have to understand what's driving that, right?
This is awesome. Well, congratulations to you. You've got something special here. You've got, the customer saying, what's the catch? This is awesome. What can go wrong at this stage? And by virtue of that, what are you focused on right now? What's really important to you? You mentioned that you've closed sales, and you're trying to focus on your customers. But tell us more about that.
Sure. It can be summed up in one word: repeatability. And that is a very loaded word, because when it comes down to thrilling your partner, your customer, you have to deliver on the service that you sold them on or that you partnered with them on, and you have to execute, and it has to match back to what you sold them, or how you sold them, and that's really important. So much so that one of our first hires was a quality assurance manager. He spent 6 years over at Harpoon. He is a brilliant guy. And he loves beer, super passionate about beer, super passionate about making beer, but more importantly, about creating beer that is the same way every time it is made. And that is super important, because that is a thing that is a challenge for these beer astronauts, which is, if I were to use contract brewing, I got to ensure that this beer is the same way, because if I start putting a beer that's made differently every time, my customer is going to rate me poorly online. My distributor is going to say, what the hell are you doing? And so we invested our first hire was, we'll call it a repeatability manager, more importantly, a quality assurance manager. And one of the first things that we did was we invested $80,000 in a really high-quality lab with a spectrophotometer and everything that's needed for repeatability. And I'll tell you, that has been something that is always not a concern, but we know we have to do it, and we have to do it well. So, and if we do that, if we knock that out of the park and make the same beer over and over again, which sounds very basic, but really doesn't happen in the market today. It's hard to do that, because it is a living organism. If we can do that, it's a home run with the customer. It's a double with the customer. But more importantly, then we got to fulfill, and we have to be able to package it and meet the deadlines. So those are the things that, when you think about it, you're staffing for quality assurance, but more importantly, you're staffing to meet the exact deadlines that you've set with your customers. Nobody likes missing deadlines by a day or 2 days. I want to hit these deadlines exactly the way that we had how we had scheduled it with them months in advance. So those are the two challenges in our business. But we know what they are. We're not going in blindly. And so we are watching for this. We're building systems for it. We're in the process of building lean, or we'll call it Toyota lean kind of philosophies around inventory management, so that we actually have all the material that we need on site in order to fulfill in what we're doing. And we're bringing in the right staff, and we brought in the right equipment. When you think about this, it's really interesting. When you're building a business, there's a philosophy to buy cheap, get the cheapest thing, man, and we can grow into it. And the reality is, if you do that, you're not built for scale. And if you're not built for scale, you're set up for failure. So we invested in these $240,000 canning lines and $230,000 bottling lines. But why did we do that? We spent extra money because we know that timeliness is very important. And For instance, with a canning line, I could have bought one for half as much money, but it actually packages the product at half the amount of time. So time is money. So you really have to sit down when you're growing and you're figuring out your business model and say, hey, is it worth the investment? And when you actually look at it and realize a lot of people are going to be doing canning here, and you have to bottle or can so much of this product, of course it makes sense. And ironically, not only did it speed up the line and speed up production by 2x, but it also was a wonderful thing that our brewers saw, and they liked the fact that they invested in great equipment. So it's a win-win, actually. But, yeah, you really got to think about, you have to be built for scale. Even something like a 25,000 square foot brewery, it's critically important to think through at the beginning. And it's a common challenge for a lot of brewers today. They might start off small and not think big, but then they're trying to become this beer astronaut, and they run into problems not being able to scale.
Matt, you speak with confidence, passion, and real knowledge about your business. And this combination is so inspiring to see in an entrepreneur. But you're a very experienced person. You've been an executive at Zipcar, at edX. You could have continued on that path and been very successful. You were very successful. Why switch? Why become an entrepreneur? Give us insight into that.
It's an interesting life brings you down interesting paths, and you have to let it take you there. And I think why I'm here today is because we were wildly successful at Zipcar, which was awesome. We really introduced people to this collaborative consumption. Remember, we started Zipcar at the same time that the concept of an iPod was out in the marketplace. We were really early on to this concept of sharing. And so what's been amazing is I've done a lot of these transformative model businesses, but I said to myself, well, that's good. So what can I do next? And so I'm a very active advisor at TechStarts, which is a really great organization that I'm super passionate about. And it's about how do you help young entrepreneurs get off the ground? So I coach and work with a lot of CEOs, young CEOs, that are kind of going through that seed and Series A. And I had this my own aha moment, my own personal aha moment, which was, I'm guiding all of these CEOs about these high growth businesses. But you know what? And the reality is, I have actually never built a fast growth business from the ground up, meaning Zipcar was already in market for 3 years, but it was struggling to find its footing. edX was pretty from the ground up, but it was like I really wanted to personally be able to speak from 100% experience when I was actually coaching and working with these CEOs. So, I am going to do the thing that I love to do, which is beer, and I am actually going to step in a CEO role and really try to build this from zero. Everything from, ordering equipment, market definition, everything, and it has been a blast. It's been very fascinating, and I'm learning a lot, these nuances, which are these things, and all the things that I talk about, putting those things into practice and seeing firsthand and validating those firsthand and saying, the aha moment is there. Yeah, there is this thing that is too good to be true moment. You see it over and over again, and it just revalidates everything. But also, as you get older, I'm 48, and you're right, I could have probably worked for a Fortune 500 or moved to Silicon Valley and worked some cool stuff out there, which is awesome, and I might do that someday. But for now, I really want to invest in my community. And so that's the one thing, too, you struggle with. Do I want to go out and grow another global business, or do I want to do something for my community? And I live in a really cool part of Boston called Dorchester. It's one of the oldest parts of the city. It's very multicultural, very diverse. And very often, retailers look past it because if you use these retail apps to figure out, where do I plop the next Starbucks, Dorchester typically does not show up. So I said, hey, let me take the bull by the horns, and I found a couple other business partners that were very similarly minded. And I really wanted to create something that was wildly created for my neighborhood. And so it really ticked 2 boxes, which is I really want to be a CEO and grow this from the beginning, but more importantly, I also want to do something wonderful for my community. Yeah. And as you get older, you start to realize it's not all about money, it's about impact. And so one of the things that I'm very passionate about is helping people kind of get into a market that they want to get into. So we have a personal commitment here to actually to hire women and hire minorities, and especially out of Dorchester, and to really we're trying to give them their first opportunity to get into manufacturing or the beer environment, the beer community. So, it's very much, it's personal, but at the same time, it's also really going in and trying to make sure that I'm validating, and I can speak from experience when I'm coaching. I can further speak from experience by coaching these young CEOs. So it's a really weird path, frankly.
Yeah, we relate deeply to your mission, but we're curious at the same time. If you play a puzzle, complete, the sentence, collaborative car sharing, online education, beer would not be the third thing you say. and yet it was beer. So how did that come about?
It's no. It's the same thing. It's collaborative consumption. It is all these brewers coming in to use the same equipment. Think about it. It's just like multiple people, 20 people sharing a car. This is 7 to 10 brewers sharing beer equipment. It's actually collaborative consumption in the beer community, which I absolutely love, and that's why I'm doing this. It's like there's so many similarities. It's so interesting.
Right, but it could be collaborative consumption of books. It could be collaborative consumption of video equipment, right? But it was beer for you. So how did beer itself became a part of it?
Two reasons. I love beer, and beer is it's liquid bread. Who doesn't love bread? And so there's a passion. You have to be passionate about the product, right? So that's one thing. But it is also a fast growth. I am one of those people that love fast growth categories, and I'm fascinated by watching how they transform. So in 2004, I saw that collaborative consumption of cars was going to be big, and I helped to make it big. Same thing with education. Anand Agarwal, who's a wonderful guy, he's the CEO of edX. He sold me on the passion of education. We can transform education, and we need to do it using online tools. And we helped do that. In a matter of 2 years, we amassed millions of people taking courses on the edX platform.
8 million now.
I know, it's crazy. It's so obviously I watch it closely. I'm still very passionate about it. And there's so many great courses that you can take online there. But it's all about transformation. And so I saw that there was, the beer category, it's collaborative consumption, but it's also one of the fastest growth markets that I'm seeing. And it's ripe for disruption, or it's ripe for maturity. And so I love being a part of that. And I will do whatever it takes to get into those categories and really immerse myself. I did not know much about beer production a year and a half ago. I know a lot about it now. And so I think that's the other thing, too, is as you get older, and in every position you go into, I almost challenge every young entrepreneur to switch verticals or switch categories every 4 to 5 years to keep themselves fresh. You need to force yourself into discomfort in order to continue to advance who you are as a business person. And that's also something that I live by as well. So not only was this a transformative category, not only was it collaborative consumption, I'm really putting myself out there, and I'm forcing myself as a 48-year-old entrepreneur to keep fresh. And I would challenge everybody to think through how they do that in their career.
Well, Matt, I'm so glad that we got to bring a story to our students, and I'm doubly glad that you are built for scale because, look, we've got students all over the world, many of them, they might be stopping by. So great that you're built for scale.
Yeah, that's great. It's very important. We're going to grow.
Hey, thank you so much. Maybe one of these days we'll bring you back to share more insights. But in the meantime, we wish you good luck. We are rooting for you. And it's fantastic that you're transforming yourself, Dorchester, and the world with your venture.
That's awesome. Thanks. I really appreciate the time to share the good word about beer. And I challenge you to come in and have a pint.
Yeah, I was there last night. They're really good.
We're stopping by.
That's right. You were there, and you had a few beers. It was great to see. It's awesome.
Matt, take care. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Have a great one.
So, Becky, you are the producer of our podcast. You live in Dorchester, and it was your idea to bring Matt to the podcast, which was a great idea. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure our students will as well. But you live in Dorchester. What do you think about Matt's brewery being in Dorchester?
It's awesome. I mean, so if you don't know anything about Dorchester, it's the largest neighborhood in Boston, but it has a really bad reputation.
It's a rough neighborhood.
Yeah, it has a very bad reputation, but it's actually a really awesome neighborhood.
What's awesome about it?
It's really diverse, and it's the people who live there really care about the community. I live there because my landlord who owns the property, he was an activist in the community for about 25 years, but now he decided to move in with his girlfriend. So my husband and I lucked out and got to have his apartment. But it's been really cool, especially, having him as a landlord, because he's sort of introduced us to the neighborhood. And last night when we actually went to Dorchester Brewing Company, we met a bunch of our neighbors that we hadn't interacted with before. And so now we have a bunch of new friends. It's a really great place. And I really love the fact that Matt, as a Dorchester resident, is trying to do something to get people to realize what an awesome neighborhood it is.
Yeah, the note I'll make about that is that we're teaching entrepreneurship in an entrepreneurial way. Yesterday, Becky and I were saying, well, okay, what podcast are we going to do tomorrow? And, it's not like the podcast is the only thing we do or can do. Life is very busy for us, and so sometimes things do happen at the last minute, and that will change. We'll create more of a system, as Matt described on the podcast. You've got to be built for scale, and we're trying to figure this out now ourselves. But Becky was entrepreneurial. She was like, all right, well, let me figure this out, and she went into the brewery where she found Matt, and at the brewery, she asked Matt to come on the show, and that's really special. I'm actually glad about the way this turned out.
I remember I was freaking out because I was like, okay, my original plan had been to interview a bunch of people about the boot camp. But since that wasn't going to work out, I was like, okay, I contacted everybody I knew and hadn't heard back from anyone. And then my landlord, who's in town now, is insisting that we go to the new brewery. And then I get there and I realize, wait a minute, this is grand opening. The founders are going to be down in the nitty gritty. Yeah. And my husband had actually met him at like a civic association meeting, because basically the neighborhood, they had to go through a lot of legal loopholes actually with the neighborhood about what they could and couldn't do as a brewery in the neighborhood. So, I looked him up online, and then I saw him and I was just like, hey, are you Matt?
Well, Becky, I got to say I'm proud to have a teammate who is socially engaged. This is why you came from Cincinnati. Boston is not your hometown, so to speak, but you're making it your hometown by embracing your community, by participating in your community. So, I just want to say that. And finally, I want to ask our students for feedback. Actually, after we finished talking with Matt, Becky and I were discussing it. We weren't rolling in it, unfortunately. But, we thought it was pretty cool to talk to an entrepreneur, learn about the entrepreneur's industry, in this case the beer industry, and that should be stimulating to us all. And then once we've learned about the industry, or kind of gotten the insights from the entrepreneur, talk about the entrepreneur's life and how that person made decisions, that person's journey. And we think this flow of a podcast may have some legs, but write to us, tweet to us, Facebook us. I'm not on Facebook, but I guess we are.
We are on Facebook at Facebook
and so
/ MIT Bootcamps.
Yeah, so maybe you can tell us if that works for you guys, because we are in business. Well, we're in nonprofit business, but we're here for you. So please let us know. Bex, any final words?
No, if you guys are in the neighborhood, you should definitely check out Dorchester Brewing Company. I think it's great for the neighborhood. I was there though. They actually the beer is amazing as well. And not only, I don't think we got to talk to Matt about this, but not only is it going to be a brewery where they brew their own beer and a contract brewery where local brewers can brew their beer, but it's also an incubation space for local startups.
Well, we're going to see how productive the entrepreneurs are there. On that note, over and out.
Thank you for listening.